Tim and I'm the shop teacher. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to create a chevron pattern wooden bow tie for this prom and wedding season. If you enjoy this video, please like and subscribe below.
I built this project using only scrap material. As you can see from this one wood box that we have here in the shop, I have a lot of it. I've also spent over 20 years squirreling away little bits and pieces of wood, some of it exotic. Here's a shelf full of offcuts of my own exotics that I use with the students sometimes for their small projects. Once I got all my scraps together, I went through and decided which woods I wanted to make the bow tie out of. I finally settled on red oak and walnut because of the contrast between them. I changed out the throat plate to a zero clearance insert so that none of the strips would fall down into the saw. Here I set the fence for 1/8 of an inch, and I started ripping the oak and the walnut into thin strips. Now it's time to glue the strips together. I use some pony clamps, and I just go ahead and lay the strips on there, alternating the different species of wood. I then lay the strips out and apply a good coat of glue to one side. I'll spread that glue out with a roller and make sure I get one side of all the strips. I'll stack the pieces back up, keeping them in order, and then tighten the clamps. Since the glue up was only about 1 foot long, I used 2 clamps on the bottom and then another one in the opposite direction on the top to equalize all the clamping forces on the boards. I run the board through the planer, that way it evens it up on both the top and the bottom. Since the plain board was about 1 inch thick, I resawed it on the table saw down to 1/4 inch. I then ran those boards through the planer to even it up. I screwed a longer board to the miter gauge and then used a drafting triangle to set the angle. I struggled with that a little bit at first. When I was gluing my boards up, I should have considered offsetting them to about a 45-degree angle so I didn't waste such a large piece when I made my first cut. Once I determined the width I wanted for each strip, I used a block clamp to set as a stop on the miter gauge. Once my fingers got uncomfortably close to the blade, I used the eraser on a pencil to hold the boards while I finished cutting it. With all the pieces cut, I started laying them out, rotating each one to end up with the chevron pattern. Add glue to all of the edges, and then I used a couple of quick grip clamps to hold it all together. The clamps wanted to bow up on me, so I ended up using the glue bottle as a counterweight here at the end. Once the glue was dried, I used a random orbit sander to even out all of the glue joints. I only sanded to 120 grit. Using a pair of scissors, I cut out the bow tie pattern that I printed off the computer. I then used some spray adhesive to attach the pattern to the wood. I print out numerous knot patterns and rearrange them on the board in different directions to get a bunch of knots to see which one I like the best. I use a bandsaw to cut out the pattern. However, you could also use a scroll saw or even a coping saw. I like to saw just outside of the line, that way I can sand to it later. I use a disc sander to clean up the edges that I just cut on the bandsaw. I start with the ends, and then I clean up the long edges on the top and bottom of the bow tie. Being careful not to give myself a manicure, I also get the long edges of the knot. Here I use a file to clean up those areas I couldn't get on the disc sander. Once that's done, I'll peel off the paper and I will sand from 120 all the way up to 600, making sure I get all the edges and any burrs or anything that might be on the wood. Here I'm seeing which of the knots that I cut out I like the best. For me, I like the one with the lines going straight across, then a little dab of yellow glue, and I glue it on there. I didn't clamp this at all. I used some spray adhesive to attach the patterns for the pieces that go on the back of the bow tie to a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. I like to use plywood because the alternating grain gives it some strength that solid wood wouldn't have. It would be weak along the cross grain if it was solid. Here I mix up way too much 5-minute epoxy to glue the pieces on the back. Here's a little pro tip. Use black magic marker to mark one of the caps and the bottle so that you don't switch them when putting the caps back on the bottles. Just dip the end of the piece into the glue and then put it on the bow tie. This would have been a whole lot easier if I wasn't trying to run the camera with one of the hands. I'll then use some extra epoxy and just dab it on with a finish nail so that I can reinforce each of those joints. I'll put 3 coats of spray poly on the bow tie. I'll sand between each coat with 400 grit sandpaper. Here we use a block of plywood with a bunch of finish nails shot through it to hold the blank while it dries. The last step is to cut a piece of 1/2-inch elastic to fit around your neck. Then attach a piece of Velcro on the ends about 1.5 inches long to give you a little bit of room to adjust the fit. If you enjoyed this build, please hit the like and subscribe buttons below.